Hi, my name is Jessica Meyerson, and I'm a co-director of the Maintainers. I'm so excited to be here with you all virtually during Puppetize Digital 2020, and I want to thank all of the event organizers for their thoughtfulness, their skill, and their effort to create a meaningful experience for all attendees. Just so you know where I'm coming from, I was raised on the Texas Gulf Coast by a public school teacher and a public interest lawyer, and I moved to Austin, Texas, as many small town Texas kids do, to attend the University of Texas at Austin in 2004, and I've lived in Austin ever since. My academic background is rooted in qualitative social science, political science, and information science specifically, and both of these fields are interdisciplinary, drawing on theory and methods from areas ranging from cognitive psychology to sociology. Human behavior has always driven my curiosity, and as evidenced by my two fields of study, my curiosity has led me to focus on 1, the way power is distributed through decision-making, or governance, and 2, the production, application, and use of knowledge in organizations and what that teaches us about relationships between people, organizations, and systems. So I would describe myself as a professional facilitator, a maintainer, an applied researcher, and a community cultivator. And today I want to share some ideas with you about the ways that maintainers help to make the world a better place. I have the great pleasure of working with Lee Vinsel, Andrew Russell, and Lauren DePina-Fraze. Together we are building a movement around maintenance thinking and action, because maintenance is not only a battle against entropy, it's also a way of thinking about how we relate to people and things that support human flourishing. You can find out more about the Maintainers and what we do on our website, but our mission is to, quote, maintain self and society through reflection, research, and advocacy in the hopes of achieving a more caring and well-maintained world. And we work towards that mission through a combination of thought leadership, research, community cultivation, and public programming. The Maintainers and the movement for maintenance thinking and action are rooted in resistance to what we call innovation speak, and a desire to understand how to care for people and things better. I should mention that this illustration by Bernardo is based on Stuart Brand's book on how buildings learn, what happens after they are built, and is meant to point out that every layer of the building uses different materials, and they all decay or age at different rates. So, you have to address building maintenance incrementally and preventatively replace specific pieces dictated by its unique rate of change. And before we go any further, it's useful for us to parse the difference between innovation and innovation speak. We are not saying that maintenance is inherently good and innovation is inherently bad. Almost nothing is that simple, and certainly nothing involving people. For example, I think we would all agree that we have to be mindful and intentional about our role in maintaining systems of oppression, such as sexism, racism, ageism, and ableism. At the same time, human ingenuity is a wondrous thing, and we celebrate it all the time in our work as the Maintainers. As Lee and Andy highlight in the book, Innovation Delusion, innovation has played an essential role in economic growth and improved quality of life. Innovation is the profitable combination of new or existing technologies and resources, and in many cases, innovation is a measurable change. But, as we often say, much of what passes for innovation is actually innovation speak. So, what is innovation speak? Innovation speak is what I would term a perverse rhetoric. It takes innovation out of the real and gloriously messy human situations in which innovation is typically sparked. Innovation speak tells us that innovation or change should be valued for its own sake, removed from the innovation's context of use and the innovation's potential impact. Innovation speak is snake oil. It's sold as a panacea to combat the basic human fear of being left behind. So let's look at a concrete example of innovation speak that's gone rampant in the education sector. The one laptop per child program, which originated at the MIT Media Lab, claimed that it would revolutionize education in the global South by providing cheap and sturdy laptops to kids, which is problematic on multiple levels. But the scholar Morgan Ames studied the life of the program and noted how none of the program leaders even considered the realities of maintenance and repair associated with these laptops and tablets. Another study that looked at an inner city school in California found that the students were fixing the broken machines. Now, if students are intentionally engaging in hands-on learning with technology, that's a great thing. However, here again, the reason the students were trying to repair the machines is because the school system accepted a flood of tablets with no plan for how they would be maintained and repaired. So how did innovation speak become so pervasive? Was it always this way? No. Innovation speak is a product of the late 19th century and early 20th century, at which point science and technology, which was experienced by an unprecedented number of people at the time as the benefits of industrialization and mass manufacturing, had become closely coupled to social progress. And admittedly, this coupling makes sense because many of the innovations resulting from this time, importantly, with government investment in national infrastructure, resulted in transformations in national health, access to education, and the U.S. economy, making it a global powerhouse. The height of innovation speak spans from the late 1970s to now, a period in which, ironically, as Andy and Lee point out in the book, economists note that the actual rate of innovation has decreased in the exact same period. So again, innovation is not inherently good or bad. Innovation speak, on the other hand, is proving to be bad for both people and the environment. For the maintainers, the movement for maintenance thinking and action, or adopting a maintenance mindset, is counteraction to innovation speak. So what are we even talking about when we talk about maintenance? The maintainers work to ground our understanding of innovation and maintenance by asking questions about what and who people maintain, what that work looks like from day to day, and the different ways that those maintenance activities or actions have meaning for individuals, organizations, and communities. One idea that shapes our approach to movement building is that knowledge is situated, meaning that knowledge is produced and consumed by particular groups of people in particular places at particular times. So you see this idea in Donna Haraway's essay of the same name, Situated Knowledges, in 1988, but you start to see its impact in human-computer interaction in 1987, the year that Lucy Suchman published Plans and Situated Actions. So when we think about maintenance, we think about maintenance at different scales: our bodies, our homes, our communities, and our societies. And we think about maintenance in different spheres of life, such as social care, software development, the environment, education, transportation, and cultural memory. In short, the maintainers ask questions, listen, and then pay attention to the commonalities and the differences in the stories of maintainers across these different spheres of life. What we hope to learn over time is, well, open and undetermined. I mean, after all, we don't know what we don't know. But here are a few questions that we're exploring. Are there common maintenance activities in different spheres of maintenance or across different spheres of maintenance? What are the effects or outcomes of underinvesting in maintenance across those different spheres? And how can the lived experiences of maintainers be documented, transmitted, and translated into advocacy responsibly so as to correct imbalances in compensation and job stability at both micro and macro scales? So let's take a minute to situate ourselves. Ask yourself, who or what do you maintain? What do you think is worth preserving? Go ahead, I'll give you a few minutes. What does that maintenance work look like day to day for you? Why are those maintenance activities meaningful? What or why does your maintenance work matter to you? And since this isn't live and I can't ask you all to post your responses in the chat box, I'll ask instead to consider sharing those responses on the maintainer's email list. Starting with the individual maintainer, where and how they're situated, and what we know based on their experience, I want to retell a story that Lee and Andy share in the book about someone named Tom, whose former job was to support the hardware that ran the company's software for sales, human resources, and other functions. Tom described how all the execs and upper management fully embraced innovation speak. And they were obsessed with new software features, but the hardware running all the business critical systems never got any attention. Everything was held together by duct tape and baling wire, says Tom. The computers running those systems were so old, in fact, that it was no longer supported by the manufacturer. And Tom and coworkers had to buy old replacement parts on eBay to keep the systems running. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen the XKCD comic that circulated widely at the beginning of September of this year. The comic depicts the current state of digital infrastructure broadly as a massive ecosystem of tools, projects, products, and services, all represented by big boxes. But all that massive ecosystem is running on top of one tiny skinny box, which is meant to represent the precarious backbone of older systems and software libraries and languages that fewer and fewer people still know how to maintain. This reminded me of Tom, and it demonstrates so elegantly the maintenance paradox. It's the foundation of all we do, maintenance, absolutely necessary, and yet usually neglected. The resourcefulness and ingenuity demonstrated by Tom and his colleagues in the service of the aging server hardware was undervalued and yet critical to the company's ability to process payments from clients, to manage payroll, and to track employee hiring. So as we've been talking to maintainers in and across different spheres of maintenance like Tom, we find many different ways that people are approaching known problems in their respective spheres. These unique challenges and the interventions and innovations that maintainers have designed to address them tell us a lot about what each of these spheres values over time, or rather, what each sphere believes is important to sustain. But we've also started to identify a common ethos or set of principles shared among maintainers regardless of their sphere. And these include maintenance sustains success. So this principle builds on an assumption that success is defined in a way that is in fact maintainable without devastating human lives and the environment. Number 2, maintenance depends on culture and management, and we will absolutely circle back to this later in the talk. And maintenance requires constant care. It's a persistent set of activities where we focus our attention on the things that we value. So you might be saying at this point, sure, I know Tom. Hey, I support Tom in my role at Puppet. Heck, I've been Tom and I get it. But how do we move from the experience of many individual maintainers to actually shifting the way that billions of humans interact with each other and their environment towards a more caring and well-maintained world? Good question. First, allow me to introduce the information maintainers and talk a little about how they make the connections between the micro and the macro. So the information maintainers started with a small group where Lee, Andy, and I asked the same set of questions that I just asked you. And it grew in concentric circles until we published a white paper expressing the voices of 43 different people ranging from CTOs to librarians to lawyers to designers. And together, a shared understanding emerged regarding who information maintainers are, what they do, and why they do it. So the information maintainers, which is a maintenance community within the maintainers, is a community of people that, quote, support the maintenance of information and those who manage, maintain, and preserve information systems, end quote. They value access, embodiment, intergenerationality, and translation. They demonstrate how they care for the things they maintain through participatory design, documentation, and raising visibility for labor and under-recognized voices in stewardship work and other forms of information work more broadly. Now, one example of a group that embodies information maintenance values is the Indigenous Data Sovereignty Interest Group within the Research Data Alliance, who has developed a set of principles for Indigenous data governance. This group of academics and practitioners recognize the tension that Indigenous communities feel between protecting their rights and interests in traditional knowledge and Indigenous data, while supporting or being subject to open data initiatives. Concerns about the secondary use of data and limited opportunities for benefit sharing have focused attention on enhancing Indigenous participation in data governance. So, the emerging CARE principles for Indigenous data governance, which stand for collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics, bring a people-centric perspective to the use of data to complement the existing FAIR principles, which focus on a data-centric model: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Now, in this way, the CARE co-creators have made this move from their individual experiences maintaining personal and Indigenous privacy and ways of knowing to shifting the way that Indigenous and non-Indigenous data creators, stewards, and users think about their position in the broader data ecosystem. And this is important because, as Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren Klein write in Data Feminism, quote, "The data economy and corporations, often aided by academic researchers, are currently scrambling to see what behaviors, both online and off, remain to be turned into data and then monetized. And although datafication may occasionally verge into the realm of the absurd, the fact remains that decisions of civic, economic, and individual importance are being made by automated systems sifting through large amounts of data. And power is not distributed equally in the world. And that fact goes mostly unacknowledged in data science." In other words, the CARE principles give us a way to explicitly identify questions of power and authority in data science, which is the only way that we will avoid recreating and maintaining systems of oppression. So, part of the move from many individual maintainers' stories to a more caring and well-maintained world is the act of translating the lessons these stories teach us into more sustainable cultural practices. As Lee and Andy say in the book, quote, "The most important element of a healthy maintenance culture, at root, is a matter of getting people organized and focused so that they can apply known techniques and strategies to tackle known problems." So, let's look at professional culture and maintenance. From what I understand, this is the heart and soul of DevOps. So DevOps is a movement of its own. It's an effort to bring a context-aware, holistic approach to development and delivery of software. Many of the definitions of DevOps describe the movement as aimed at increasing speed while maintaining quality. DevOps is also about creating a specific type of work culture where operations like sysadmins, developers, and testers work together cohesively. In 2012, the same year that Alana published the first DevOps report, Jim Bird, a Canadian blogger and self-described experienced software developer, project manager, and CTO, wrote, quote, most of what you read and hear about DevOps is about getting to market faster and building tight feedback loops. But DevOps is even more important in keeping systems running, in maintenance and sustaining engineering and support. Project teams working on the next new thing can gloss over the details of how the software will actually run in production, how it will be deployed, and how it should be hardened. If they miss something, the problems won't show up until the systems start getting used by real customers for real business under real load, which can be months after the system is launched. And he wraps up his post saying, quote, "The reality is that you can't maintain a system effectively without understanding operational issues and without understanding and working with the people who operate and support the system and its infrastructure," end quote. So, the DevOps movement is a maintenance innovation. It isn't rhetoric, it's a set of practices and a cultural shift in IT that values preventative maintenance and asks every team member to pay attention to where they are situated relative to the entire software lifecycle. The expectation of common understanding and from that empathy is baked into the DevOps model. Members are expected to know how their contributions will affect the rest of the team and the system as a whole. So, in many ways, your professional position as leaders and ambassadors of the DevOps movement pre-positions you as agents of change and builders of the movement for maintenance and long-term thinking. However, to create a caring and more well-maintained world beyond the domain of software, we have to first make intentional decisions about what we value and what is worth sustaining, and then examine whether the ways we currently relate to people and things embody those values. I'll note that Bernardo's line graph is entitled Functionality or Quality versus Time. Quality is the y-axis and time is the x-axis. And you'll see that over time, user requirements go up and maintenance goes down. These are both deviations from the original design or intent of the project. So, here's your call to action, and it is deceptively simple. Acknowledge your position, how you're situated relative to others, and your agency to make change. Think about the million small decisions that you have the opportunity to make every day as you go about your daily practice or routine as designers, builders, maintainers, and communicators of and about DevOps systems. Ask yourself what you're optimizing for in those decisions. Is your practice influenced by innovation speak? Is it optimized for short-term wins and medium-term breakdowns? Are you accruing maintenance debt for yourself, your team, and your clients by design? Have you considered what's working? What success is worth sustaining or building on? Can you take a more incremental or modular approach to building that acknowledges that as needs change, they never all change at once? How do we bound innovation to the areas that call for it, rather than to adopt innovation as an ideology that erases past innovations as well as current caring acts of maintenance that are keeping things in working order in our personal and professional lives? Remember, one of the 3 principles of the maintenance mindset is that maintenance depends on culture and management. I told you we'd come back to this. And while company culture is certainly shaped by key leadership roles within our organizations, you create and recreate culture every day through your individual behaviors, what you decide is important, what you choose to optimize for, and therefore what you pay attention to. It's the aggregate of many individual choices each day combined, plus the specific affective and structural influences of key personnel and clients and markets that constitute organizational culture as a whole. Now for leadership. Similarly, start with your own experience. Acknowledge how you're situated relative to other members on your team. The difference is structural. As a leader, there are power and information asymmetries between you and the rest of the team. It's critical to explicitly acknowledge all of the ways that you shape thought and action within your organization through internal communications and external communications, hiring and promotion practices and processes, like who's rewarded with raises for which types of behavior or results, and the ways that meetings are structured and run, or budgeting, or team development approaches, and many other processes which may not be entirely transparent to the rest of the staff. Remember that leadership proficient at using innovation speak to motivate teams, and that may well be bought into innovation speak themselves, are choosing FOMO as an organizing principle for your organization. Fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, and fear-driven rather than mission-driven organizations will always stand in their own way. So if you can bring the maintenance mindset to the decisions that you make each and every day about process and resource allocation, while your staff and team does the same thing in reference to their own practice, you are ensuring a culture shift that gives yourself, your organization, and really the whole world a better chance of not only surviving, but thriving. Thank you.